Happy National Pasta Day. I love pasta, all pasta. Curly pasta, straight pasta, ridged pasta, pasta shaped like elbows, pasta shaped like bow ties. They're all magical in their own right. But what about pasta that kills? It's happened. And what about places that serve pasta that are haunted? They're real. Let's talk about them. The spaghetti warehouse was built around the 20th century. Through its years, it has been a house for pelt furs, a produce warhouse. Yes, it was the radishes against the apples. I was there. It was deadly. It was also a produce warehouse and a pharmaceuticals warehouse. It was originally named Diesel Botcher, but was bought by the Spaghetti Warehouse in 1974. One of the most popular ghost tales of the Spaghetti Warehouse is that of a pharmacist who was very dedicated to his job. One night, he was extremely busy and had a pile of paperwork on his desk. He grabbed the stack of papers and headed back to the elevator. He wasn't paying attention and stepped into the dark without looking. He fell several feet to his death. He had stepped into the elevator shaft, not the elevator. When he didn't return from work, his wife became worried. She went to the warehouse to find her husband, only to find people standing about the building talking about what had just happened. Inside the warehouse, the wife would see the remains of her husband crumpled at the bottom of the elevator shaft. She was so traumatized that she herself died a year later. It is said that their grief-stricken souls haunt the area of the vast restaurant. She is said to rearrange furniture, leave dishes and utensils in a mess, tap guests on the shoulder, and even pull their hair, which is really rude. I wish you would, ghost lady. Diners have also reported seeing floating objects and unexplained cool and clammy breezes. Restaurant employees have their own fair share of ghost stories, and most are too scared to go upstairs. One waitress stated that she felt one waitress stated that she saw a floating whisk. One wait. What the fuck? One waitress stated that she saw a floating wicker basket near the wooden staircase and she watched it as it was gently set down on the ground. She also reported hearing her name being called from an empty room. Another waitress was attending to guests when a bottle of wine was lifted from the table, floated through the air, and landed upright. So if you're ever in Houston, Texas, make sure to stop by the Spaghetti Warehouse. Next, we will discuss a death that happened because of pasta. Bad pasta that looked good. An impasta, if you will. A student ate pasta for lunch, then he died. AJ is a 20-year-old going to the emergency room for abdominal pain, nausea, and diffuse bleeding. Paramedics were having a hard time because he continuously vomited until he passed out in the ambulance. AJ was a struggling college student. Like most other people, he was looking forward to a huge student loan debt that would follow him most of his adult life. The most affordable food for him was cheap pasta and pre-made sauce. He made all of his food for the week on Sunday and stored it in the refrigerator to ration it over the week. But sometimes he would accidentally leave his food out overnight. His friend loved to joke that one day AJ would die of food poisoning. Except this time, it wasn't a joke. Earlier in the week, AJ had left his pasta out for 2 days. Normally, he would have thrown it away, but his roommate found it. Assuming it wasn't as old as it actually was, he put it in the fridge. As AJ reheated the now 5-day-old pasta, he thought it smelled funny, but he used a different brand of sauce this time and assumed it was that. Immediately after finishing the pasta, his stomach began to hurt. He was bloating and he could feel the gas building up in his stomach. He soon began vomiting and thought that the pasta probably wasn't any good, but assumed it was just a little food poisoning. Soon, he went to bed, but before falling asleep, he made sure to drink an entire bottle of stomach medicine. Something along the lines of Pepto-Bismol, in hopes that it would do something for his nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. But it wasn't enough. 3 a.m., AJ runs to the bathroom and vomits in the sink. Eventually, his roommate finds him passed out on the bathroom floor. His skin and the whites of his eyes were a greenish yellow. AJ gets up and stumbles around before falling to the floor once again. The roommate calls for 911, and he's taken to the emergency room. Not knowing the full history of what AJ is going through, the doctors at the hospital assume that AJ is actually suffering from alcohol poisoning. He's an otherwise healthy young man and on no medications. He's vomiting and passing out. With his liver failing, it all pointed to alcohol poisoning, even the yellow of his eyes and skin. A blood test finds that there's no alcohol in his system. Instead, it is found that AJ is hypoglycemic. That is a low sugar presence in the blood. AJ ate his last meal of spoiled pasta 16 hours ago by this point. After piecing the information that they found together, they now assume that AJ's food poisoning from his pasta is likely some kind of bacteria. But something is wrong. Usually, food poisoning just causes stomach inflammation, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. It does not normally cause acute liver failure. And to make things worse, they can't figure out which bacteria is causing the problem because culturing would take days to come back with answers. AJ doesn't have days. His liver is failing, and fast. They are starting to find liver enzymes floating around his body, meaning parts of his liver have began to die and are now circulating through his body. His kidneys also begin to fail. Unfortunately, there was no liver available in time for transplant, and AJ didn't make it. During autopsy, it is revealed that bacteria might not have been the only thing wrong with his pasta. The bacteria found is one that usually causes gastritis. I have gastritis. My mom tried to give me Pepto-Bismol, and the pharmacist was like, "That's the worst thing you could do." My mom tried to kill me. I'm kidding. I love you, Mommy. By itself, the food poisoning that can come from it is usually self-limiting, meaning you can recover from it through normally bodily functions. But the strand AJ had was unlucky enough to flourish in potassium, which we humans are filled with. This led to his liver failing, kidney shutting down, and eventually swelling in his brain that caused his death. But for AJ, a second agent was found. But this came not from the pasta, but from the stomach medicine he drank after first vomiting. It was basically aspirin. And with drinking the whole bottle, it could be considered an overdose of aspirin. This will cause conditions like Rye syndrome and also result in liver failure. So, adding this medicine on top of the bacterial poisoning resulted in a double whammy that led to acute liver failure. So, be careful of food left out more than a few hours. And if the food smells funny, don't eat it.